Hey, nonprofiteers, welcome to another episode of Nonprofit Biz Talk. Today I have with me Ronessa Strickland-Roberts. She's going to be here to talk about programs with us today. Ronessa, can you go ahead and introduce yourself to the audience?
Hi, good evening, everyone. Again, my name is Ronessa Strickland-Roberts, and I am the owner and principal consultant at Volcano Consulting. At Volcano Consulting, we specialize in public health and some allied health, education, training, writing, including grant writing, program evaluation, a little bit of research, but we're a multidisciplinary public health consulting company.
Awesome. So, based on what Ronessa has just said, we know that she is uniquely equipped to talk to us about data, because I keep talking to you guys about data, and data is king. And in the public health industry, data rules. So she's going to talk today. She's going to talk today about programs and how data envelops programs and makes them better, and how you can use them, I guess, towards grant writing, because you need data when you're going to write grants. So go ahead, Ronessa.
Absolutely. So what I planned to talk about tonight was kind of just starting with some simple concepts about program design and development or planning, and kind of move towards more complex program implementation strategies. Yes, data is king. When you're trying to get funding, you need to have evidence of effectiveness. And when you're running a program, you want to know that you're doing things that make sense and that are not costly or in time or money. So you want to be measuring yourself, and all of that is under the umbrella of collecting data. But, I have a lot of people call me and they want a grant written. And once I start to ask them about, the things that they have planned to do, they don't always have a plan. They just have an idea, and they, I think, leave it up to us to try to figure out what they should do. But you need to come to a grant writing or other similar consultant with a plan yourself. We don't know what you're doing as well as you do. You should be the expert at what you do, what you currently do, and what you plan to do. So I do a little bit of backing up. Before we write any grants, we need to have a program. And so I just want to jump through a couple of steps of program planning and development that are really simple and may sound really obvious when I start to say them, but they're not as obvious when you're in the middle of things, and when you're just trying to make a name for yourself or your organization, or to get your program running. So hopefully these will sound familiar and they'll be simple, but they're still worth saying. One of my kind of mantras is I like to say the simple things, because everything's not obvious. When you have so many distractions, sometimes you need someone to tell you the obvious things.
I agree.
Yeah. So basically, if you're thinking about doing a program, you need to first do some sort of community assessment or analysis. You need to figure out who your target population is, who's your audience. You need to, when you do so, you want to use primary or secondary data. Primary data would be information that you've collected yourself, and hopefully you are already doing that. It doesn't need to be anything fancy. You can have a spreadsheet, Excel spreadsheet. You can have a notebook. If you're writing things down and that's all you can do right now, that's good enough, as long as you're keeping information. Eventually, I would suggest that you get a little more fancy with it, but you just need to have information down. So primary data is what you're collecting yourself. Secondary data is what someone else collected, but that information happens to suit your target population or the area or the subject matter that you're working in. So you want to collect that kind of information. If you want to start a youth program, you need information on youth. You need to know what the composition of youth are in your city or your county, wherever you plan to serve. If it's just a neighborhood, what's the composition of young people in that neighborhood? So you need to have that information, and then you need to understand what the problems are and have some information to back up what the issues are. Um, Most of all, you need to be able to find and substantiate any gaps in services. So if there are plenty of youth programs, but this particular thing is not being done by any of them, that might be something that a gap you need to fill if you're qualified and that's something you want to do. But you definitely need to look at gaps, and you need to make sure that you're not duplicating services. So if there's already a youth program down the street from you and they're doing all the things that you're doing, it may not be advantageous of you to do the same things that they're doing. May not. It just depends on where you are in the population. But the point is, know your population and the community you plan to serve. Um, if you're just starting out, again, just write things down. Make sure that you're writing. Sorry, I keep looking down, but I have some notes in front of me. Um, I like to talk about the 5 W's, and we all learned those in elementary school: the who, what, when, where, why, and then the how.
The how.
Yeah. So you want to know who you're serving. We talked a little bit about that. If you're serving youth, you need to know things about youth populations. You need to know how they receive messages, how to communicate with them. Where do you find youth? Where do you find the subpopulations in the youth that you want to serve? Do you want to serve female youth or male youth or youth in a certain age bracket? You know, who are you going to serve? So you need to know those details. When are you going to serve them? So that means what time of day, what day of week, and it also means how often. So are you going to run your program once a month, every week, just through the summer, whatever that is? Make sure that you that's clear and you have and write it down. Um, and then there are some programs that run on a different frequency. Some run for 3 months and then they're off 3 months. You know, those types of details you need to have pretty solid understanding of what you plan to do. Also, again, with subpopulations, if you're serving youth, are you serving youth parents? Are you serving a certain gender or a certain age, or a youth with a particular role, like an athlete, or have certain youth that have certain interests? So just be really, really detailed about who you plan to serve, and when you plan to serve them. Think about where you'll serve them. Again, city, zip code, county, neighborhood.
Yeah.
Where are you going to be providing these services at? Why you're serving them is really important. So I also have a lot of people who reach out and they're looking for assistance either with grant writing or they need to talk about their program design, and they are just doing things. You know, they're just
I call it throwing throwing paper against the wall and hoping that it will stick.
yeah,
That's
they're
what I call it.
so they're always well-meaning, they're always
Yeah.
really passionate, they're always altruistic, and they're, you know, sacrificing all of these things, but they haven't done the assessment to know if what they're doing is actually necessary. You know, sometimes just because somebody's showing up at your program doesn't mean it's going to have a community impact, and that is what funders are looking for. They want to know that you're making an impact in the community. Um, so I really try to do an assessment of the current activities, if there are any, and we try to understand, you know, is this worth your time? Essentially, is this something that you should be doing? Especially if you are looking to be not just grant funding, but sponsorships, donors. You know, people want to know that their dollars are making an impact. It's not just about having what we call butts in the seat, but
Right.
you know, we need to have some sort of positive outcomes. And again, that's where data comes in, but I'll get to that in a second. Um, and then also, so where am I? On the why? Yeah. Why are you serving them? Are you serving them because they are underexposed? They don't get health education, or they don't get mentorship or whatever it is that the reason that you're serving them? I hope that is, and I hope that you plan activities that will help alleviate that problem. And so you have to have a focus. And then how are you going to serve them? What are you going to do that's going to alleviate the issues? And the how you do that is really important. What specific activity are you going to conduct that is directly linked to some sort of positive outcome for that population? So you really have to think about it in really specific and somewhat linear ideology. You know, you have to, from A to B, what is A and what is B? What's going to be the outcome? Um, your activities need to be planned. So you can't just, like, I'll give you an example. So I had someone call me who had a food program, food assistance program, a mentoring program, a after school reading program, a tutoring program. She had all of these programs, and she, again, you know, she was really passionate. She was hardworking. She was doing this stuff around the clock. She was taking out of her own pocket. But what did the youth really need? Um, I think through our conversations, we figured out that what was most important and what was creating the most impact was an after school program. So my advice to her was you need to focus on that. Not that you can't do those things if you find that you're doing something and there's other needs, but you need to do one thing well. One or two things really well, get that down packed, get you some evidence and some data behind that, and then you can start to justify expansions like other programs or other activities. So keep it really simple. You know, we're going to give a self-esteem class, and that self-esteem class is supposed to increase self-esteem. That's simple. Not we're going to feed them because if they're hungry, their self-esteem is affected. That's true, but if your goal is to increase self-esteem, you need to stick to the activities that are meant to do that. Does that make sense? Yeah.
Absolutely.
So I've been talking for a second. I just wanted to pause. Any comments or questions? No?
No. Mm-mm.
Okay. Um, And so some other things you want to think about is what are your current resources? What do you already have in your favor? Do you already have space? Do you already have contacts? You know, don't underestimate contacts. If you know a lot of people who would be interested in what you're doing, that can go such a long way because if you have contacts and nothing else, you can get the other stuff.
Yeah.
Um, so it's really important to not live in a silo, talk to other people about what you want to do, and know how to ask for what you need. Um, so know and understand what your current resources are and what you need, and be realistic about that. Even when you're asking for funds from someone, if you're asking for grant funding or sponsorship or donors, you still want to be realistic with them. Hey, we have this, but we we can't do this.
Right.
Or, you know, if we had your funding or your support, this is what we could do. So be really realistic about it. I think a lot of, especially young nonprofits, they feel like they have to be all put together and everything has to sound good and everything has to look good. And you have to have all these fancy promotional items and glittery stuff, but
Yes.
you just need to really be realistic.
Yeah.
So be
Not
realistic
only
about
that,
the
they want to have all the glittery stuff, like you said, but the foundation isn't there. They don't have the
right.
community surveys, which should be done even before you start a program.
That's
This should
right.
be done at the onset of you thinking about a nonprofit organization. If you have an idea for a mission, you see a need in the community, you need to validate that need. And but the only
Right.
way you can validate that need is to go out into the community and find out if the community really wants what you are going to be serving and how they want it. Because what we think, or the way I think,
Absolutely.
because I'm coming from a teaching background, so the way I write out my lesson plan and I perceive this lesson, and I keep telling this story, like it has happened to me so many times because I taught for like over 15 years. So I write this beautiful lesson plan and I have it everything timed out, 5 minutes for this, 10 minutes for this, 20 minutes for this. The whole lesson is, beautiful. And I get in the classroom and I start teaching, and I'm up there patting myself on my back, mentally, because I'm thinking that this is the bomb.com.
Right.
Okay. Like, these kids they're gonna just love this lesson. They're gonna leave there all pumped up, like, oh yes, Miss Allen did a great job. And you get up there and you start teaching, and the classroom is dead silent. Like, when you watch cartoons as a kid and they play the crickets when nobody's
yeah. That's what
nobody's is listening. So that's what the classroom was like, and you turn around and you're like, so
now
how
what?
am I doing? Like, do you understand what's going on? And they're looking at you with blank, glossy eyes, like, we didn't understand a thing you just said.
Yeah.
And you have to
already know.
Right. And you have to be ready and able to readjust whatever it is that you plan to meet the need of the population that you're serving. And my population is my students, and I have an outcome that I need to meet. So if what I planned in my head does not meet their learning style, I have to adjust it, because at the end of the day, the outcome has to be met.
That's right.
There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. It has to be met. And so that's the same thing with nonprofits. When you are going to serve the community, you have a mission, you have a vision, and you have outcomes in between there that have to be met. And the only way you can do that is to find out how the population wants what you want to serve. Because the way how you think you want to serve it may not be the best way for them to receive it. So I just love that whole breakdown that you said, the who, what, when, why, and how. And that's like the principle of program planning. Even when you're a teacher and you're doing your lesson plans and you're doing your curriculums, I need to know the who, what, when, why, and how of what I am going to. Why am I teaching it to these kids? Why do they need to learn this? I remember when I was in high school, I couldn't figure out, even though I wanted to become a doctor, really and truly, do I need to know trigonometry in order to do I need to know trigonometry? To give some medication to somebody? Like, when am I ever going to work on a trigonometry problem? Yeah. Seriously. Never. And that's why a lot of kids zone out in high school or junior high, because they cannot see the correlation of what you're teaching them and how it's going to help them in real life. It's the same thing with your nonprofit. It sounds like I'm digressing, but it's the same thing.
All of that's true. All of that is very true. And believe it or not, a lot of public health planning and programs aligns with a lot of educational strategies. So it totally makes sense. But there's something we say, things are different between theory and practice always. So the idea in your head, that theory that you have, your plan for your classroom curriculum, you have that theory and the idea in your head, but it's always different in real life. People are dynamic, they're ever changing, their attitudes, behaviors, thoughts, and all of the things that they know change from minute to minute. And so, real life is very different than what we have in our head. You can just always expect that. Now, that doesn't mean you shouldn't plan and that you can't anticipate, but doing things like community assessments will give you an idea of what the needs are or how you can reach people. I'll give another example. This has happened actually several times that I know of. So people have these great ideas, and there are some really good programs out there, and they are, although they don't have a nonprofit or public health or a program or community health background, they are doing most things right. But what I've seen over and over again is people building programs and getting funding for them and implementing them in underserved communities, for example, and don't provide transportation or don't have a transportation partner. So it's not if you build it, they will come, because they will not come if they don't have a ride.
Not only that, you talked about the ride. I work for Urban League, and they offer GED prep for people who haven't graduated from high school. And one of the other big things, they gave bus passes. so that,
Mhm.
the adults could come, because they didn't want that to be an excuse. But another thing that they realized was that the students, female students especially, had issues with daycare.
Yeah, and
So they had to
that's
find a
another
daycare partner.
that's another
Yeah.
that's another thing that people forget about.
Hmm.
So that was going to be my next point. Think about your population's barriers. You can't just, people like the glitter, and I'm nothing against the glitter. Like, I think everybody should have a fancy bag and, cute pens and pencils and buttons, and, there's nothing wrong with those things. But before you do all of that, make sure that they have childcare or transportation. Make sure you're not scheduling your program in the middle of the workday, but you're serving parents. Those kinds of things are really simple, but they can make or break a program. And I've seen it over and over and over again. The other place, this is a little bit off tangent, but when I do grant writing trainings or workshops, when I talk about the budget, make sure you're putting these things in your budget
Hmm.
if you're looking for funding. Because, and not that you have to provide childcare, but address that need through a partnership. Some funders are probably not going to pay for childcare or transportation or food or whatever it is that you feel your population needs, or you have not feel your population needs, that you have discovered that your population needs. But you can fill those gaps with volunteers or partners. So but having it on your radar is the most important first step. Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, it's true. I like to call them the subcategories of programming. you know,
Yeah.
so you have the program, and as the program is running, and that's why assessment and data is so important, because as the
Yes.
program is running, you're going to see the different needs of your students or your community as you serve them. You're going to
Yeah.
find out that, okay, so I wanted to feed, let's just say I wanted to feed the population, so I have a soup kitchen. Then I'm gonna probably figure out that a lot of my the people who are coming in are maybe homeless, and maybe I need to partner with somebody who
Right.
does housing. I may
Exactly.
find out that a lot of them have mental illnesses. I need to partner
That's right.
with a mental health facility. I may need to partner with a clinic. A lot of
Right.
them may be undereducated. So I need to probably offer or partner with someone else who does a GED program. There are just so many things
Yeah.
that can come out, because, like you said, people are multidimensional. They're not. We don't fit into one little box.
That's
We come
right.
out the box. We spill outside the box. You
Always.
know, we're like a volcano. We're forever erupting.
that's that's right. You
Yeah.
can't you can't one thing of it, like, the only thing constant when it comes to people is change.
Hmm.
And people will be one person this minute and another person the next. You just never know.
Exactly.
And so you can't rely on that idea in your head. Of course, ideas are good because that's where great things start,
Hmm.
but you need to do a little more work before just running with an idea.
Hmm.
And back to data, I wanted to talk a little bit more. So if you've gotten to this point and you've got all these things together, the 5 W's, how you're going to serve them in what manner, then you need to think about how you're measuring your program. By the way, this is everything I'm discussing here is what I feel is the most important part of grant writing.
Hmm.
So if you're looking for a grant writer or you're about to start writing a grant yourself, your program design is going to get you a lot more points than anything else.
Yep.
Um, your program design has got to be pretty. It's got to be lit. It's got to be put
Yeah,
together.
it does. It really, really does. Your case
Right.
statement, your need assessment, these things you
Yes.
need to, and that comes about from doing your research and taking the time to actually write out a comprehensive program.
Right. And I do understand, most people don't have our backgrounds. They have a great idea or they want to step out and do something good. But just remember to think in details and be specific. You can learn the jargon along the way. You will learn lots
Mhm.
of lessons, but make sure you're learning from them and don't try to silo yourself. I'm going to say that again because all too often people are trying to do everything by themselves, and they're afraid to partner with other people because they feel like they're going to steal an idea, or they're going to something's going to happen awful. And that's just not a plan for success. It really isn't. And many funders won't even consider you for funding
Exactly.
without partnerships. You have got
Right.
to get
You
out
have
and
to
play in the
partner. I'm
sandbox.
glad you
Yeah,
said that. You
yeah,
have to partner. You have to have meaningful partnerships. Let me
absolutely.
stress
Yeah,
meaningful
yeah,
partnerships.
yeah. We need to
Because
make that.
sometimes you tell people they need to partner and they go out and they, like one person I used
Yeah.
to, she needed to get some partners,
Um,
and she went out and I think like in a week she partnered with like 15 people. I'm like, but what are they bringing to the table? This doesn't make
right.
sense. How does their mission align with your mission? It has to be mission centered. What is the give and
That's right.
take? There is none.
That's
Okay.
right.
How,
It
is it
needs
going
to
to help you
complement.
with funding? Is it going, what is it doing for you? If it's not doing
Exactly.
anything for you, then you don't need it. That's just dead weight that you're carrying around.
Right. Your plan on paper needs to match what you want to do in real life,
Mm-hmm.
and vice versa. So, and those things may change, but you'll adjust and you'll put it back on paper. On paper,
Right.
and you'll keep. That's going to be an endless cycle. Measuring your success in program evaluation is really what we're talking about. Is an ongoing task. It's not something you do once and stop doing it, because things will always change. Science changes, information changes, people changes, right? People change. So, it's something that you're constantly having to keep up with. But again, if you can just get yourself a simple Excel spreadsheet, make a questionnaire, even if you're not, we have our scientific ways of, you know, administering surveys and questionnaires, and there is a scientific method for those things. But I think for most people who are running nonprofits, they don't they just need to think about the basics and think about things in detail. um, and you'll learn, I find that you'll kind of learn the science along the way, without even knowing it. If you're diligent, and if you're trying to do the right things all the time. But we call tools and instruments things like questionnaires, um, forms that people fill out, polls, whatever, case notes, sign-in sheets.
Mm-hmm.
Those are the tools and instruments that you need to be getting together and keeping a record of. I can't tell you how many people I've spoken to or have encountered who have been doing. I've been doing workshops for 3 years, and they don't have one sign-in sheet. They literally can't say we've served X amount of people in 3 years. Like the most basic kind of data that would be
Right.
asked for in a grant or any other funding endeavor. They're going to want to know, okay, well, you've been doing this. Well, how many people did you serve? That's a natural question.
Yes.
But again, simple, but you got to remember to think of those things.
Exactly.
Um,
Um, One of the things I tell people all the time too is when you're um, running programs, you have to make sure that you have an evaluation process to make sure that
Absolutely.
you're meeting your outcomes, that you're meeting your benchmarks along the way. Because sometimes, like we just talked about, even though the program is well written out, the need of the population, maybe they're not where you thought they were. If you're running, say, like a
Right.
GED program, they may not be where you think they are. So they may come in for GED classes, but really and truly, they need ABE classes before
Mm-hmm.
they can get to GED. So
That's
it
right.
may be that you need to reassess and reshuffle and start an ABE program and then transition them into the GED
Absolutely. That's the
program.
other thing people don't like to do. So
Yeah.
they're doing what they're passionate about, which is always good, but it can't stand alone. It has to make sense, and it has to have some sort of measurable impact or outcome that people can see, not just funders, but the community. If you want support, you've got to be presenting something other than your participants staying in the same place that they were when they first came to you. And the only way that anybody knows that is you have proper documentation. So
Mm-hmm.
there are different types of evaluation processes. Again, I try to keep things simple. Of course, if you hire me to do evaluation, then I have to think about the science a lot more closely. But for most people who don't have a public health or nonprofit background, they just need to know the things they need to do. They don't need to know the jargon. They don't need to know the terminology.
Mhm.
But there you can evaluate a program before you implement it with a community assessment or analysis. Or you can, if you already have your program idea, you can do what we call a pilot, where you
Mhm.
can just do a practice run with the population that you plan to serve. And all you're going to do during that pilot period is find the things that went wrong, find the things
Yes.
that went well, went well, and you're going to record it all. You're going to That's the biggest part of it. You're going to record it all, and then you're going to take some time to make corrections,
Mhm.
and then do it again, either through full implementation or another pilot, another
Yep.
practice. Do it until you get it as close to right as you probably. Nothing's going to be perfect, but
Exactly.
it really pays off to plan this into your program strategy. So
Yeah.
you can do evaluation before, during, and after programs. It just depends on what it is you're trying to measure. During a program, you want to know, are the participants enjoying your program? Do they find the program beneficial? Are your partners playing their part? Are they taking on the role that you initially thought that they would? Do you need to cut back on partners? Do you need to add partners? Are your staff satisfied with what's going on? Are they having issues or trouble with logistics or training issues or training needs? Do they need professional development? So you can also evaluate throughout your program. And then, of course, at the end, you want to make sure that your program, so there's kind of two ways you can look at programs at the end. You can look at how that impacted each individual, and collectively, did those individuals have an overall positive outcome? And then you can look at your community impact. You can think about, let's say, for instance, a program that feeds the homeless. So their outcome is that person is not hungry at the end of the day. But that itself doesn't do a whole lot for community impact. So what would do a lot for community impact is if you have a organization that does things like educational assistance, home housing assistance, food assistance. It goes a little more in depth, and then we can say, well, now the total homeless population has gone down. We need to do less feedings now. The one thing we say about public health is we are constantly trying to work ourselves out of a job because we want to make impact. And of course, we probably will never do that, but our goal is to get rid of the problems. We don't want people to have to come back to us. So, same idea and concepts in the nonprofit world. You
Right.
really want to get to a point where you're no longer needed. That's
Right.
what you should be working towards every day.
And when you talked about, transitioning from, say, the homeless feeding the homeless population, and finding out that, they need these other services, and these services help them to maybe get off the streets and get a job. A lot of nonprofit organizations think that because they partnered with other organizations to provide these sub services, that they can't take credit for it. They can't use those
Oh,
statistics on their grants, and nothing could be further from the truth.
that's right.
You're the one who made the partnership. The client came to you initially, and you were able to feed them out to the various other organizations to get the services that they need. So it's that client is still your client.
So,
you
so I
know?
want to take that a step further. When it comes to data, if you have partners, you should be figuring out how you're sharing data.
Yeah.
And so that nobody has to worry about who takes credit for what. If I refer someone to you and I have a process for tracking that referral and figuring out what happens to that person, then those numbers belong to me as well as my partner. And
Yes.
so that's another task that you need to do. Depending on the program, you need to do each other a favor and make it so that even again, if you're sharing a Google
Yeah,
uh,
I was just gonna say share a
a
spreadsheet.
Google spreadsheet,
Yeah.
if you're sharing a Google spreadsheet, then just make it accessible to everyone, and everyone's responsible for filling in that spreadsheet, and all of you use it.
Yeah. And I like to tell them that after a program is finished as well, they need to follow up. So if I was running a GED program and at the end, my outcome is to have them pass the GED test, then I need to know what happened after you passed the GED
Yeah.
test. So you can't just pass the GED test and I say, oh, it was nice seeing you. Bye. You know,
Did you get a
that's
job?
not it.
Did you
You know,
enroll in
I need to know,
college?
like you talked, right. You talked about impact. I need to know how far does this impact reach? So, like you said, did you go to college? Did you go to community college? Did you go to trade school? Were you able to get a job now? Did you get a better paying job if you had a job before?
Exactly.
Did you move from
Yeah.
McDonald's to maybe some corporate office? I'm just saying, you know,
Right.
what
Mhm.
happened? How did getting the GED impact your children? You
Right.
know, are your kids doing better in school?
Can
You
you
know,
help them
maybe
with
you
their
had a
homework
child who
better?
dropped out of school. Now, did that child enter my GED program too? Am I making impact across the board in the community? The impact is not just on one person. It should trickle down
That's
into
right.
other people within your community.
That's
So
the
that's
idea.
something you really need to think about. Keep data. And I tell them, follow up with your clients for at least 2 to 3 years. You know, it doesn't take that much. It's an email,
Right.
it's a phone call, you know, one, maybe every quarter you call just to see, hey, what's going on. If you're doing
Exactly.
job services is another one that I like to talk about a lot. I see nonprofit organizations that do career services, and they'll help them create their resume, do the interview, take them to Dress for Success, get a nice outfit,
I think I
you
know what
know,
you're about.
get them a job, and then bam, that's it. They're done. You don't know what happened to this person when they went on the job. They may need sub services again. Like
Right.
they may need a bus pass for the first 3 months so they can catch themselves. You know, they may not have the money to
Yes.
get that bus pass. They may need help getting babysitting for their kids so that they can get to work on time. You know, were they
Right.
able to go on the job and perform? If they weren't, did they lose their job? Do they need your services again to help them find a job? And then you need to fix whatever happened the first time around. So there's just, I mean, there's so many layers to
Yes.
the services that you provide. They're just not one dimensional. Like, I can't say that enough. We want to
Right.
provide one service and that's it. But the services have so many subcategories, and you have to be cognizant of that. You have to
Right.
be aware. You have to be evaluating. And like you said, recording data. Just keep a lot of
Yeah.
data
Data
and
sounds like a big
actually
scary word.
analyze it. Just don't write it
Yeah.
down. Actually sit down
That's
with
it.
your team and analyze the data and see where you can fill in the gaps, like you said earlier.
That's right. Yeah. Data sounds like a big scary word, but it really is just you recording things. You know, even if you don't, if you're not some data scientist and you don't know about statistics and, you know, biostatistics and social science and so on, you as long as you've got it down, somebody else can help you with the rest of that
Yes.
stuff. But you can't, and I'm going to say this because some people expect this too. You can't expect to call me and have me make it up for you.
Right.
We can't just fabricate these things, and we can't guess and, you know, have guesstimates. We need to have solid information, because one thing for sure is that that information, if it doesn't match up, you will see it in a grant proposal. No matter how well written it is, if things don't seem to line up, it's going to show to a seasoned grant reviewer. And I also do grant reviews, and I've seen it. Well, you said you served this many people, but a third of those people came half of the time. You know, I start to look a little deeper into the numbers,
Mhm.
and so you really shouldn't try to make a habit of outsmarting these reviewers, because they're smart people. The
Yeah.
other thing I wanted to mention when it comes to data is another thing that people have a little bit of an issue with is understanding the difference between an anecdote and evidence. There's a difference. You know, an anecdote, there's an example I give in my grant writing course of, of, let's say you're running a program for young women and you're looking to improve their self-esteem. Well, after every session you go out, you know, as everybody's leaving and you're greeting parents, you're asking the girls, you know, do you feel your self-esteem is improving since you've been in this program? And let's say today you asked 10 and 9 of them said yes. Um, but what do you do with that now? Do you say, oh well, they said that, they told me that they were having an improvement in self-esteem.
That's not enough.
No, it's not enough, and that's anecdotal evidence. And there's again nothing in itself wrong with that, but
Mm-hmm.
that's not tangible, and it's not something that is, it's not evidence. So
Mm-hmm.
what would evidence be? Evidence would be having a questionnaire and asking the youth and having it recorded. That's not proof, and that doesn't make it the truth that your program increases self-esteem. But now you have evidence that it does. Um, and so, for most things, we're not going to get to the truth. So, if for example, under the same example, their self-esteem could be improving because they're in another program that talks about self-esteem. And so because they're hearing these messages over and over in multiple places, that's increasing their self-esteem. Or, they could have entered your program in a really bad place, and things got better since they've been in your program. It has nothing to do with your program, but yes, they feel like their self-esteem is increased.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not just the point of asking them on paper and recording it, but also the way that you ask. You need to directly ask, do you feel this program increase your self-esteem? Instead of, that's very different from, do you think your self-esteem increased in the past 12 weeks when
Right.
you happen to be in this program?
Specificity.
Yeah.
Be
Yeah.
specific.
Again, back to being specific and
Yeah.
detailed.
Yeah.
Yeah. Really important. And
That's
again, keep
awesome.
it on paper. I'm
Yeah.
always saying that.
Mm-hmm.
I'm always saying
Because
that.
your memory goes, but the paperwork will always be there as long as
That's
you keep
right.
it,
Yeah.
scan it, file it away, whatever, so that when you need it, you can always go back to it. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I definitely believe that.
So
Well, that
I
was
have,
some great information.
I was just going to say, I have no idea where we are in time.
Oh, that's fine. Yeah, that was some really, really good information. And I hope that the audience really takes heed to it. I mean, it was simple. It was just things that it was almost like you gave a bullet point,
Yeah.
a checklist. Here's what
Yeah.
you need to do. So that was really good. So do you want to tell the audience where they can find you and what programs that you have that can help them to, I guess,
Sure. Absolutely.
achieve sustainability and profitability in their nonprofit organization?
So some of the services that we provide for nonprofits, is one of the biggest services we provide is grant writing, but we also provide program development, grant management. If you've got a grant and you're not quite sure how to manage it and stay in compliance with the requirements for that grant, we can help with that. We do help with some social science and research strategies, like developing those questionnaires and making sure they're worded correctly, to make sure that you're collecting the information that you think you want to collect. But we can, anything between programming and grant writing and evaluation, we've pretty much got that covered. I do offer a online on-demand grant writing class online. You can find it at our website, and you can also, from our website, reach us and schedule a technical assistance call or a one-on-one kind of problem solving, um, advice kind of call. And we do offer free 30-minute consultations, and all of those can be scheduled and booked from our website, and that is at volcanoconsulting.com.
All right. Well, thank you, Ronessa. Thank you for being my guest today. And like I said, this was a very informative um, session on programming, because that is the lifeblood of a nonprofit organization. That is how you're going to get your funding,
That's right.
and that is how you're going to impact the community. So thank you again for being my guest today.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Good night.
Hey, nonprofiteers, thank you for watching another episode of a Nonprofit Biz Talk TV. Remember, there's someone in your community waiting for the help of your organization, and it is your responsibility to make sure you get it right. Don't forget to like, share, comment, and subscribe. Until next time, bye-bye.